With Democrats controlling two branches of government, some progressives think it's time to reshape the third. Changing the composition of the court may sound radical, but it's actually already been done.
Over the years, the first Supreme Court had 6 justices. It's changed back and forth over the times, changed 6 different times, but there have been only 9 justices since 1869.
In other words, the number isn't set in stone. Court size wasn't explicitly outlined in the Constitution because, you guessed it, the framers wanted to give Congress flexibility. The first change came in 1801, when President John Adams signed the Judiciary Act, which reduced the court down to 5. Adams was trying to limit incoming President Thomas Jefferson's future appointments. And if that sounds familiar, it's because lawmakers will try to curb the power of future presidents for decades to come.
The American people may well elect a president who decides to nominate Judge Garland for Senate consideration. The next president may also nominate somebody very different.
Alas, Jefferson and the Republicans repealed the Judiciary Act, restoring the court to 6 in 1802. That number continued to tick up, reaching its peak of 10 justices in 1863. That only lasted 3 years before going back down to 9, and remaining that way ever since. The concept of court packing, though, kept on kicking.
But we cannot yield our constitutional destiny to the personal judgment of a few men who, being fearful of the future, would deny us the necessary means of dealing with the present.
In the 30s, President Franklin D. Roosevelt was frustrated that parts of his New Deal were being knocked down by the Supreme Court. So, he came up with a plan that would allow him to add 1 new justice for every sitting justice older than 70.
He wanted to be able to appoint justices in sufficient numbers to counter the decisions of the so-called Four Horsemen.
The Four Horsemen were the conservative justices who frequently struck down his legislation.
I think Roosevelt was surprised, but there was a lot of pushback to this recommendation from his party and from others. They saw it what it was, which is basically a tinkering with the size of the court for partisan ends, and the bill was not enacted.
That once radical FDR-era idea is now under serious consideration by some Democrats.
The conversation that we're having now, which is pushed mostly by liberal activists who are unhappy with the present Supreme Court, is really the most stark example of activists and members of Congress being serious about this idea of adding more seats.
President Biden isn't a fan of expanding the High Court, but did create a bipartisan commission to study possible structural changes. President Trump reshaped the court with the confirmation of 3 conservative justices during his term, thanks in part to political maneuvering from a Republican majority. Their ideologies are a driving force for Democrats pushing for change, but the timing of these appointments also caused controversy for both parties.
When Justice Antonin Scalia died, with 10 months before the election, the Republican Senate refused to consider President Obama's nomination of Merrick Garland to fill that seat. And then there was a second example when Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg died in September, right before the election. Her dying wish was that the next president be allowed to name her successor. Instead, President Trump nominated Amy Coney Barrett, and the Republican Senate rushed to confirm her before the election, even as voters were casting their ballots for the next president.
Democrats argued that adding seats could balance out one of the most conservative-leaning courts in history.
The counter-argument is, once we go down that road, the court will become a political football, and its size will be adjusted one way or the other as different majorities take control of the Congress.
So, should we expect any changes to the Supreme Court during the Biden administration?
People are unhappy with the Supreme Court, or some people are, but not to the point that you have a broad popular majority that can induce Congress to make a major change like increasing its size or imposing term limits. I just don't see that happening.